Grace and peace. Welcome, welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. And indeed, I am delighted and honored to be counted among the fathers.
And Apostle Carl was the first person that I preached for when I came to America some years ago. And so he got me started on this journey. So I appreciate that. I tell you, that was a wonderful thing.
Yeah, that was in Miami.
It was. It was in Miami. It was. Awesome. Awesome.
Man.
We're discussing today men, and we're looking at the roles of men. And I believe it's an important conversation because in this day and age, men are struggling to see where they fit in. You know, traditionally, men knew where they were. They were the head of the home. They were the breadwinner. They were the protector. They were, these sort of descriptions. Now I believe that roles have been misunderstood and potentially blurred. What's your thoughts and feelings about traditional roles and current roles?
Well, I grew up in an era where traditionally men were forced to be men in the whole concept of manhood. They were the providers, the protectors, and they're the leaders in their homes, in their community. I remember there was people in the community who would whoop me.
Right.
Where I grew up. and for that reason, there was a level of respect and not wanting to do something to create anything. So, because you don't want to get whooped on the street, then go home and get whooped again, because they're going to tell your parents,
Sure.
what you did. And, you're going to get a whooping again because you made yourself get into problems. So they were able to whoop you first. It's how has the roles changed? I think it goes back to the garden. If you notice, if you search the scriptures in the book of Genesis, oftentimes the women have gotten the blame. Eve got the blame for what happened in the garden.
The woman you gave me.
The woman you gave me.
Right.
When in reality, the serpent was able to have a conversation with this woman that he gave you 5 times. 5 times. The serpent went back every time to have a conversation with Eve until she caved.
5 times.
5 times.
Wow.
We can go through the scripture.
Oh no, I believe you, man of God.
5 times. He spoke to her once, and then he came back again, and of course she had rebuttals to what he was saying. Sure. We eat that, we shorty. He said, "Nah, you ain't gonna shorty that." And then go back again. It's because he don't want you to get the knowledge from the. He don't want to be like gods. And 5 times, where was Adam? If it was even 1 time, Adam being the protector, Adam being the provider, Adam being the leader, where was he? Why wasn't he in position?
Wow.
So this way, the serpent wouldn't have had, or his woman wouldn't have had any interest in listening to somebody else's voice.
So there was a void.
There was a void that he was missing. He was missing, and he was not in position, and which is the reason why the roles have reversed, because men are not in position.
Wow.
To take their rightful possession.
Why are they not in position?
They're not in position because we're too busy chasing things. We're too busy chasing that, which is the reason, again, we go back to the garden.
Right.
Adam was somewhere else, doing something else. And so when he arrived, exhausted, he didn't have time to even argue with Eve about what they did.
Wow.
She presented an opportunity, and because our need and our proclivity of wanting something that we can't have. Think about that. We're so inclined. We work hard. We get all these shifts on the job because we're seeking for riches. We're seeking to better ourselves for something that we're not necessarily even qualified for, but we going after it with everything and thinking that our work ethics, our hard work, our sweat and tears is going to make it happen.
Right.
Oftentimes, people don't get to that level because somebody else beats you at the promotion. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
So here he came back, and she was just able to present to him. Well, he just said they just don't want us to be like them. They not like us. So in doing that, in showing him that, he just ate. But there's always a consequence, which spiritually, in 2025, we're still living the consequences of the garden.
Of men that are missing from their position.
Missing in action.
So do you believe that the issue is that men are missing, chasing the wrong thing? Because the stats say that 40% of households in the US, women are now the predominant breadwinners. So how did that come about, in your view?
It came about, again, because men are missing.
Got it.
Chasing everything else.
So the wrong focus.
The wrong focus, the wrong mindset. Their aspirations are not leveled. It's not balanced. You see, okay, the scripture said that, and for the husband is the head
Of the home.
of the wife, and I'm not trying to go ahead of you.
No,
The
go ahead.
shows women now have had to accept. Remember, what the part of the issues or the downright indictment that was laid down on man. And when I'm speaking of man, I'm being gender specific, but at the time it wasn't gender specific. When they ate the fruit, he just spoke into the existence as a generation, as human, not necessarily male or female.
Right.
But we're living that now. So the scripture says, for the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, right? When you look at that, in each of the three sections that Paul literally referred to the scriptures in the household code, I would call it. Ephesians 5:22, 28 to 20 to 33, Ephesians 6:1-4, Ephesians 6:5-9. He first addresses those who are under authority, wives, children, and slaves, right? But before he addressing those in positions of authority, which would be the husbands, the parents, and the masters.
Right.
Wives now are commanded to submit to their husbands. The word says your own husband.
We'll get into that.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
We gonna touch that in a while. But it's a different climate because she now has to step up because he's missing in action. And a woman's heart and her mindset is a nurturer. She's a creator. So you give her a lemon, she gonna make lemonade.
Right.
She's forced to take on a role that she wasn't necessarily designed for. Doesn't mean she can't do it, but she's forced simply because, again, he's not in place.
Got it. So the reason why we've got this disparity, the economic situation, is because the man is out of place. So again, you said it left a vacuum whereby other things could get in place.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you this question. Why do you believe in the church, particularly in the Western world, there is a disparity of somewhere between 65% female and 35% men? So most churches are predominantly female driven. There are a lot more females, and that then creates an uneven.
It's unbalanced.
It's imbalanced.
It's imbalanced because I'm gonna respond with this. Men are turned on by what they see.
Yeah.
Women are turned on by what they hear. A woman is more intellectually stimulated based on what she hears.
Wow.
She's not coming to your church just because of what she sees.
She's coming because of what she hears, and
coming because of what she.
But he needs to see some stuff.
He needs to see.
What does he need to see?
It all depends on the individual, because remember, we're hunters by nature. A hunter has to see something to go after. So
does he need to see success?
He needs to see something that represents him in a way that's going to make him better, that he thinks he can attain.
Wow.
So it could be success. It could be just the image. It could be the personality.
So is that why people like Andrew Tate have got such a mass following? You know Andrew Tate?
Yeah.
He's a YouTuber, and he's got the Ferraris and the helicopters and muscles, but he got a whole huge following, particularly from males. Because some say he's misogynistic.
He's showing the world something that they can attain.
Yes.
And the nature of human,
and they're seeing it, like
they're seeing it. And the nature of human is to say, well, shoot, he no different than me. If he can get it, I can get it too. And this is why you have competition, especially in those circles, because people feel he has a podcast or he's a YouTuber and he's doing this. You know what? I'm gonna go rent me some high-end cars and do the same thing. You get what I'm saying? So it's always not necessary learning the fundamentals behind what Andrew Tate is presenting. It's only going after competing because of what you see.
So men are hunters and competitors in a positive, I suppose it can be negative.
It's positive and negative.
Yeah, positive and negative.
Because it depends on what you're competing after.
So we need to, as the church, we need to be demonstrating in a visual way certain things that these men want to gravitate to.
We, as a church, we have to demonstrate the fact that a man can come in and be a man, and be comfortable in his ability to do that. Every man, if we take our shoes, if we were to take a pair of shoes that you've worn down, and if those shoes could tell the story of every place you've been in those shoes, what shape would it actually bring into maturity or into manifestation of who you are? What would it say about you?
Sure.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All of us have different shoes.
Different
aspects of our lives.
Right.
Different areas of our lives. And those shoes tell stories about different things that occurred, good and bad. And if we allow men to come into an environment where they can relax, not being judged, because the thing is, when a man is judged, he does everything to kill that, to destroy that thought, and his actions towards executing that may not be good, may not be, it may, because it's not working. There is no real thought that's put into it.
Yeah.
He's just moving based on his emotion.
Yeah.
I can't, ain't nobody gonna talk about me like that. I've got to do something to show my kids, and this is what happened. And then when it fails, his discouragement forces him to become a recluse. A recluse is not going to show you their weakness. They just avoid you.
Wow.
In avoiding, you have things where men don't live up to their responsibilities. They don't take care of their kids.
It's isolation. It's not.
It's basically, that's all it is. But it's a mental and physical operation.
You said something very powerful, and obviously we're in Father's Day month. we have a very serious problem with fatherless homes and children who don't have a connection with their fathers. Why do you think that is, and what do you believe? And I suppose it's a pretty broad question, but what do you believe the answer is to try and defeat this, particularly in the black community? We have a real issue with those who grow up without a father or without a father role being played. So, talk to me. What do you believe
Why
is
do
the
I
problem,
think?
and what do you believe we can do to defeat this?
I think the problem is that men who end up in that type of situation where they're not involved, there are different factors to men not being involved. No man, and I'm saying this, no man in true self-worth and honesty would walk away from his child
Right.
unless he's forced to.
Okay.
Now, I know everybody's well, you don't know what I'm dealing with.
I can feel some things being thrown through those lenses out.
That raggedy man. That no, he didn't necessarily. He didn't want to. A man cannot look at a child that he participated in birthing, this bone of his bones, flesh of his flesh. His blood is running through this kid that he's sure of. I ain't talking about the one that say you are not the father. I'm not
Right.
talking about those.
Right.
I'm
Right.
talking about surely no. To see himself being reared in something else, he's not going to walk away willingly unless he's forced to. There are different factors. We have women because let me back up to the man. He wasn't taught how to be a father. He never had a father in his life. And a man who never had a father in his life, if he means well, always want to do better than what he never had. Okay, so how do you fall into that position? And I hope I'm following the question.
No, you're following it brilliantly.
I get into that position when the woman is bitter and angry because she can't have you. And a lot of times, the conversation of having you is not based on love; it's based on manipulation.
Right.
That's a whole nother. So she would rather have you because she can manipulate you.
Right.
She can control you. Because remember, the roles have been reversed now.
Because the man was out of place, now we have a
Because the man was out of place. She can control. And in doing so, but when you now woke, you're now, you want more than this. And you're not allowing yourself to be controlled, not allowing yourself to be what do we mean by control and manipulation? The way she talks down to you. That's not setting an example for the kid.
Right.
She talks down to you. She belittles you. You can do 10 things right, but what's highlighted is the one thing that you do wrong.
Are there also,
Frustrated.
aren't there also men who say, well, if I can't have her, I'm giving up on her, and she may want to break up with him, and he says, well, I'm not dealing with the child or with her.
Well, yeah, but there's always a root cause to that thought trail. That's what I'm saying. A man is not going to do that unless he's forced to. So let's be honest. What's the reasoning behind such a decision? What is it? And if we search for the truth, we will find out that there is more to him saying what he said than what's really going on. So it's it's a delicate subject.
Sure.
Because I honestly don't believe a man who is taught to be a man is not going to live up to his responsibilities based on what he created.
But then you have some men who have numerous children.
Mm-hmm.
All of them have an economic responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
and he has more children than he has finances. Therefore, he backs away from some or all
Oh,
because, he's been.
he got out of control.
So there were some of the situations we have which are very real.
It,
Because there's a lot of
but
men that have
there's
been, what is it? They've got, what do they call it in America? In England, we call it maintenance. They call it
child support.
child support.
Mhm.
And, there's all those kind of issues
Right.
that arise from that.
But watch this. Okay, a man is on child support, and he has multiple
Children.
baby mamas. The pressure is going to be on him based on what the woman does, because she will determine if he's doing enough or he isn't. There's but so much he's getting out of his check. You get what I'm saying?
But didn't he know that when he was having all this?
Well,
Was he not fair? He had one child support, and then he got 2, 3, 4.
I don't think anybody goes into it to generate being on child support.
Right.
He's searching for something.
Sure.
He, in honesty, the man is searching for something. But we are again turned on by what we see.
Right.
She's turned on by what she hears. And when the two come together, all she hear is that he don't have no money. He ain't,
She don't want to hear that.
She don't want to hear that. All he sees is venom. He sees resentment. See what I'm saying? He sees attitude. So he goes to the next one that's showing him warmth and kindness. Because men love their peace.
True.
That's why we have man caves. That's why we have when we're watching the game, or
We don't know no one to disturb us.
Or you're playing the game, you're playing Xbox or PlayStation, whatever. You don't want to be disturbed. You're locked in where everything around you doesn't even matter, because that's your place of peace.
Yeah.
And so she wants your attention. She's gonna come and plug the thing out, or turn the TV on, in order to get your attention. But there was another way to do that.
Sure.
So our actions play the role in how we get a reaction.
So we need agreement on some level. So in marriage, obviously, or relationship, you want that agreement. But even if things don't work out, try to get an agreement, try to work with him and him work with her for the betterment of the child.
Well, if we're talking about marriage is a different animal, because marriage is a covenant.
But
covenant is never convenient.
Exactly.
So it's you when you think about it, it's actually even worse when there's a marriage covenant, because two people are dealing with the concept that they're stuck. For good, the good or the bad, better for worse, sickness or in health, right? That could be considered, I got to deal with this whether I want to or not. It's not that a relationship outside of marriage, anybody can walk away. Sometimes they don't even give a second thought about the kid, about anything. In a marriage, it's different. You count the cost before you even say
I do
certain things that's going to trigger certain reaction. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, you calculate.
You calculate the risk. I mean,
so are we saying, going back to the other question, that the way to defeat this household fatherlessness is agreement and us coming into one accord and not making it difficult for one another, for there to be agreement?
Nothing successful can operate without there is unity.
True.
If there is no unity, the kingdom divided of itself cannot stand. So your house is a kingdom. Your home, your, your relationship, your marriage, that's your kingdom.
Yeah.
You are the head of that kingdom. If it is undivided, it's going to flop.
So you're saying that the children are sometimes collateral damage.
100%.
Sure.
The kids, okay, let's look at a government. You have the president, that's you, the head of the household. You got the vice president, that's the wife. Okay? You got the cabinet members, that's the kids. Right? Now, the buck stops with you as the president. But if there is no unity in the house, there's confusion in the cabinet, you and the vice president are at it, we cannot accomplish anything positive for the government to grow, the governmental order of life to get anywhere. There has to be unity.
But doesn't that then take a certain level of man who is strong, who takes his place, who is more alpha in his demeanor, in his mindset? Now we're producing at times weaker men who are not taking their role. We're producing stronger women and weaker men.
Well,
that then means that the structure you just mentioned isn't exact on all occasions.
I think that the issue as it relates to now meaning we were never taught. Some of us, our fathers were never taught. Their fathers were never taught, based on the economical times and struggles and challenges back then. So it's a rippling effect. It takes one person who has the heart of God, the mind of God, that wants to change and break the generational curse.
Wow.
That they have identified in their family. Now, I'll give you an example. Some fathers, well, it's done, I was listening to a father quite recently talk about and it was almost like regret because his son had transitioned, but he was talking about the fact that his son was coming around, was now coming back around, and the relationship got better. It's not that his son stole anything from him, did anything, but his lifestyle did not actually complement who he, the father, is.
Right.
In terms of church, terms of his faith. Now, I'm saying this to every father. You are a father first, even as a man of God. We tend to separate the roles when our children are still looking at us as fathers.
Right.
It don't matter if you speak in tongues. It doesn't matter if you run the aisle. It doesn't matter.
Daddy.
You're still daddy. When the church doors close and you go home to that house,
you're daddy.
It's not deacon so-and-so. It's not reverend so-and-so. It's dad. And what the children are looking for is that dad-son, dad-daughter relationship. But because dad was never taught, was never shown love from his father, we could say he's learning on the job. And in learning on the job, you're going to make mistakes. But even in making mistakes, we have to be responsible enough to understand that our mistakes are what they are, mistakes. Get up, try again. But does our culture gives us the right to try again? You see what I'm saying?
It's true.
Men are attacked, they're abused, they're ostracized, they're looked down on, and somebody's posting something about something that a father did, not understanding the dynamics of whatever happened,
Yeah.
what brought him to that point. But it now becomes a big, so now he's moved now to a place where he has to defend something that he shouldn't have had to. So our fathers dropped the ball because their fathers dropped the ball. And you're getting it.
I'm getting it. Some of our fathers, yeah.
Some of our fathers. Well, that's what we're dealing with. The misfits.
Sure, yeah.
The shortcomings.
They dropped the ball because their father dropped the ball, and you create a cycle.
And then in some cases, it's the mothers who stepped up to implement the diversion to break the generational curse. Because she had a father. See what I'm saying? She had a father in her life that taught her certain things. So sometimes mothers become that person to teach you what your father didn't.
Yeah.
Now, I'm Jamaican. I didn't know, and I'm gonna be 100% transparent. My dad was a disciplinarian.
Okay. So you grew up with your father.
I somewhat. My father was young, but he was a sweet boy.
Okay, so he had different children.
And he was no, he didn't have different children.
Okay.
I was the only child, but he was a party boy. He's a party dude, and the family they had they was all in all the parties because his cousin was a successful record producer and so on. So they were at all the sessions, and they were back then. Bob Marley and those guys were coming out, and they were involved in things of that nature. From based on collaboration, okay, or connection. So that was my dad. My grandmother raised me. My father and my mother split up when I was a baby, and my grandmother took me, and she raised me.
Was your grandfather there?
My grandfather was there. But in the midst of even that, my grandfather was there, but he was always working. His responsibility was to discipline.
So he just came home with the belt.
He just came home, and my cousin got more whoopings than the law allowed. I was my grandmother's baby.
Sure.
But I saw these things. My two cousins, one female, one male, they were, she had to be basically do everything that grandma told her to do as a woman, prepare, iron, clean, all that stuff. And my cousin, he was feeling himself because he was a good looking dude. And so, he did what boys did.
Sure.
And so, but he would, and when he tried to fight back, my grandfather would show him, it's my old this, So but my granduncle, he lived there. And his thing was he was always reading the scriptures.
So you had male figures there.
That was another male figure. My dad would come and go to change to go to the next partner. Didn't really see him, right? But this is how my dad would show his affection. He never, at the time, my dad never one day looked at me and tell me he loved me, but I knew he loved me. I'll be standing in front of him and he put his hand on my shoulder. He would be playing with my ears, and these are things that you had to figure out. This was all they knew. Why? Because his father, my grandfather, was always working.
So he didn't have the model.
Didn't have the model to
be
follow.
Able to father, yeah.
And so I grew up with an understanding that they didn't know any better.
But I tell you what was very positive, the fact that you had your uncle and even your granddad, though he was very busy, because I believe in a society where fatherlessness is dominant, too dominant, having stepfathers or uncles or people that can play a role where there's a vacuum, I think that's very important.
It's absolutely important, and it's absolutely
And I think that's where
significant.
pastors come in as well, to a limited amount, because obviously they can't be in the house. But obviously that is another area where you can have
I
a
think
male visitor.
pastors are gifted to be external fathers
Yeah,
outside of the pulpit,
yeah.
um, if we care to.
Mm,
If we care to, because you have the ability to be of influence to young men who are looking up at you, young men and women looking up at you from the pulpit. They're looking at you at the pulpit, and whatever they're thinking in their head, they aspire to be that significant. Not
that's good.
necessarily from preaching, but just to be that
Just in
significant.
general,
Yeah.
yeah.
And we as pastors must understand the role that's been entrusted to us. But again, it's a role that is exemplified, or is a role that is portrayed or lived. Let me say lived outside of the pulpit.
What do you think? That's great that you said that, because I think role models is an issue for us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we have sports players, we have arts, music, um, but we don't have enough areas that men cover. Even, I know Barack Obama was the president, but since then there hasn't been enough male role models, um, or high value men.
Mm-hmm.
And a high value man, financial success, status, physical appearance, charisma and leadership, and someone who's willing to treat their woman with exclusivity. So how can we produce more high value men, role models, that one can aspire to?
Well, a
Because men
high
need that, don't they? They need it.
they need that, but it again it boils down to revelation,
Yeah.
and I'm not just talking about revelation from the scriptures or from a spiritual perspective. In the natural, a high valued man isn't defined by his net worth. That's where we need to recalibrate our minds. A high value man is defined by his integrity and his reputation.
Wow.
Okay, let's put it to test. Diddy's a high valued man, but his integrity and his reputation has created stain. Whereas even if he was to father something, you would automatically contend that there is some abuse
If he's found guilty?
if he's found guilty. So the Bible says in Proverbs, who's slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit, and he who takes the city.
That's nice. Love that. Sweet.
We don't. What we're seeing here is anger that is unrighteous. Whereas anger that is not justified, anger that is expressed, is coming from someplace. There is a root that is trailing
So
these
it's so
situations.
powerful what you're saying, because that means we need to reevaluate what we deem as high value.
Exactly.
Because the aspiration is, if you got the money and the Ferrari, you the best fix in sliced bread.
Exactly. And that in turn can create more issues generationally. You know, anger then becomes expressed in ways that are not good for others.
Wow.
Anger that is expressed in ways that are not glorifying God.
Mm.
And we almost picture that as a display of power,
Wow.
because they got money, because they got the bling, they got the look,
Success,
the
their name.
success. It's power, it's might, it's strength. But the Bible is saying here that whoever is slow to anger
Hmm.
is better than the mighty. So what do you mean? Strength then, in interpretation, is found in slowness to anger. High value men, in reality, ought to be slow to anger. More mighty. You're more mighty based on how you handle crisis.
So emotional intelligence,
Exactly.
integrity,
And that's more powerful
character.
than money. is more powerful than an image, because people can have an image without anything to support the image. And how often have we gotten tricked by
Empty
image?
True.
So you become stronger in reality, in human form,
Right.
because if you're now evaluating something before you're responding to it, that puts you way above the person who got the money. Like, all right, handle it. No,
Buy some more drugs.
there you go. So then he goes on to say, then he who rules his spirit,
So he's in control.
self-control, he doesn't let his anger rise and get out of control. He's better than he who takes a city. That's what the scripture is saying.
Wow.
Now, isn't that high value? You're better than somebody who could take a city just because you maintain self-control. You're not getting angry
That's good.
over frivolous things. If you
So the women need to then know
what they're looking for, what they're accepting. You know, the scripture says, he who findeth a wife findeth a good thing. The problem we have today is the women are the ones looking.
why aren't the men looking?
When it's a man's response,
Why are men shying away from marriage?
It's not that men are shying away, but if women are prone to give you the milk, then why do you need to store the cow?
So you're saying they're giving it away too easily?
They become too available, too easy. So there is no challenge. A man, remember, we are hunters. That's who we are. It is within our nature to hunt. But if a woman flip the script and start hunting you, what are you going to do? Run. Because it's not normal.
Right.
It's not normal. Listen, I've been going through the airport and women tried, you know, I'm not saying I'm anything, but women try to get my attention.
Right.
Even with a ring. Because the roles have reversed, which started back in the garden.
Wow.